This is the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast, episode number 36.
Tell me that you love me and you'll be having peas for supper, chicken man.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast. My name is John Melly, and this is the podcast dedicated to teaching in-depth and advanced marketing strategies for people in the voiceover and audio production professions. My goal is to help you make more money by showing you ways to leverage your time, charge more for your talents, and allow you to spend more time doing the things you want to do in your life. Hey there, it's John. How are you today? Thanks for tuning into this episode. Very excited to have Susan Friedman on as my guest, and we're going to be talking about how you can create riches and niches. And this goes with the theme of the podcast about creating your own products and services that you offer for sale, creating properties that you own and profiting from them. Really great conversation with Susan. We'll get to that in a minute. I just want to share a couple of fun things with you before we get to that. You know, I'm kind of a health and fitness nut. I go through my own struggles on maintaining consistency with all of that. But, I put some posts on the Facebook group page for the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast, and I had something about how sleep and lack of sleep can contribute to weight gain and things of that nature. Very, very important that we not burn the candle at both ends. If you are and you find yourself gaining weight, well, there's a real scientific reason for it. Your hormones are a little out of whack, and interesting article for you to read there. Along the lines of health and wellness, I've had an interesting experience because I purchased a beehive about 2 months ago. You know, I read that the bees were collapsing, that there's a lot of problem. The honeybees are having a problem surviving for various diseases that are affecting them. And I think it's called colony collapse disorder, or CCD. CCD had a totally different meaning for me when I was a kid. It was our version of Sunday school. Anyway, the environmental impact of not having honeybees to pollinate crops is a problem. And so I thought, you know what? There's this company in Boston. It's called Boston's Bees, or the Best Bees Company, something like that, whatever. Anyway, you can buy a hive from them, and they'll put it in your yard. They'll maintain it for you. You know, I don't have the net that I drape over my head or the gloves or anything like that. I'm not interested in getting involved in all of that. But these guys will come out once a month, check the hive, make sure everybody's hunky-dory and there's honey and all that kind of stuff to feed the bees. And the neat thing is, at the end of the season, I get to have the honey crop and the wax and I think some bee pollen, all the products that you can get from a beehive that are really healthy. I'll get that as part of this service. And I'm contributing to the environment because all these little guys, they're actually ladies, the female bees, the worker bees, they're all out about the neighborhood pollinating trees, etc. And so aside from the healthy food aspect of all of this, I have found, and I am a total geek, I'll admit it, but I like to stand there and watch the bees. You know how some places have fish tanks for you to relax? You can get a fish tank at home and you can relax by just watching the fish swim through the tank. Well, this is like having an outdoor fish tank. And I stand there literally a couple of feet away from the hive, and I watch these bees flying in and out of the hive, and you can see the little pollen on their legs that they've collected from all the plants and stuff like that. And I get lost in it. I'll spend like 10, 15 minutes just zoning out, looking at the beehive. So I've done something kind of fun. I took a short video. It's 50 seconds, and I posted it on the episode page for this episode of the podcast. So if you want to check out my beehive and see the little critters flying in and out of the hive, they're making honey, and I'm really excited about that. Homegrown honey from the neighborhood. I bet that's going to be delicious. Anyway, I can't wait for that. But it's been a lot of fun and just really, really relaxing. And I mentioned this in the health thing because we need relaxation. We are busy bees. Busy people, sorry. I couldn't help myself. And we're kind of burning the candle at both ends a lot of the time. And Rest is important. Relaxation is important. And we've got some neat things coming up. I'm actually working on an audio program about walking and consciously walking. That's coming up. I'm going to be sharing that information with you. This is a product that I am creating. We've determined that there's a market for it, and we're in the process of developing that product right now. So I'll be telling you more about that in next week's episode. But that's just an example of creating products and services that you can make available for sale using your voiceover skills and your editing skills. And this is going to be unlike anything you've ever heard before. You're basically going to learn how to walk all over again. And I'll bet 99% of you, if you listen to this program, once we're finished with it, you'll find something in the way that you're walking that you can correct or improve and make better. It is a fascinating dive in the biomechanics and posture of walking and walking with efficiency. How did I get sidetracked on this? So anyway, go to the voiceovermarketingpodcast.com and click on episode 36. You'll see an icon for a video where you can watch the bees flying in and out of my hive for about 50 seconds and tell me if you don't find it relaxing. I'll be willing to put money on it that if you just spend 50 seconds watching that video, you're just gonna chill. It's a good thing to stop and watch nature. I love it. Anyway, we have had, as of this episode, 28,231 downloads of the various odd and sundry episodes of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, and I want to thank you for that. We've had a huge number of downloads on my last episode. That was an episode with Andrew Locke, where we learned about some marketing secrets that Disney uses in their theme parks primarily. That has been huge. Have almost 600 downloads for that in just a week alone. That's high for this podcast. At any rate, my conversation with Susan came about as she's an accountability partner for me, and we talk a little bit about that in the interview. We talk about how you can create your own niche based on your own experiences, and this ties in perfectly with going way back to episode 19 of this podcast, which still gets a tremendous number of downloads, using your own personal story in your voiceover marketing. Episode 19. And in that episode, I offer a free download of my story, my voiceover journey that I use in the marketing of my voiceover business. And in your story are jewels, diamonds, chunks of gold that you can mine for creating your own niche, because most people do not start off in voiceover. They start off from some other place. And we're going to talk about that with Susan. But if you haven't, I've also put a link in the show notes for this episode, episode 36, a link to being able to download my version of your own of my personal voiceover story. And you can see how I've constructed it. And you can do the same thing for you. And in that story that you have lived, that you create for yourself, you will find opportunities to create products and services. And we're going to talk about that with Susan. So let's go talk with Susan. But stay tuned afterward. I'm going to come back with a couple of things for you after my interview with Susan. Okay? Thanks. Let's go talk with Susan Friedman. So welcome back. As I mentioned in the first part of the program, my guest today is Susan Friedman, who is the author of Riches in Niches, correct?
How to make it big in a small market.
I love it. And the one reason why I wanted to have Susan on today is well, first of all, she's my accountability partner for podcasting. And we can talk, which is a good thing for everybody to think about in terms of working with coaches and people to keep you accountable on different projects. I was asked by a guy the other day, how do I get so much stuff done? And part of it is I work with coaches and I have people who kind of say, hey, how's that project coming along? And if you can build that in to your day-to-day activities. It can help you get a lot of stuff done. But I loved the title of your book, Susan. And
Thank you.
It's a best-selling book, too. Can you explain a little bit about the book and how you came up with the idea to write the book and what it's all about?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because it's a nice story, because I was in the trade show arena, training and coaching, and I always considered it a niche market, or a niche market as they say over here, but overseas it's a niche market. And so over the years I built up myself as an expert in the industry, doing various different marketing techniques.
And this is for trade shows where people would, at conventions and stuff?
Yes, it was trade show training, working with exhibitors, helping them do a better job at exhibiting at trade shows.
Okay.
And so it occurred to me that I wonder if the different marketing techniques that I'd use to help create myself as a expert and quasi-celebrity in this space could be duplicable, and that other people could take the strategies that I'd used and create themselves in a niche market, a niche market, and build up their own credibility as an expert. And so I sort of played with it, and I took it to an editor, and I said, "What do you think?"
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "I love it."
Yeah.
And that was how Riches and Niches was born, that I really took the ideas that I use, the different strategies, even though at the time I hadn't, mapped it out exactly as, I formulated it in the book. But I talk about 7 different strategies that you use.
The idea is that this can be applied to any business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was the whole premise of the book, is that anybody can take these and apply it to whatever industry they're in if they're interested in niche marketing themselves.
So I've talked a number of times in a lot of episodes of the podcast about using your talents to create products and services that people want to buy. And you build that into the business, not stop auditioning entirely for jobs that other people have for you, but also create your own stuff so that you have properties that you own and you can make money from on a regular basis. Because a lot of times people work in these worlds, voiceover people in particular, work in worlds where they're competing against literally thousands of other voiceover talent. And it's the same thing for other industries. And that's a good thing when there's a lot of a particular thing, because that means there's money there to be made. But there's a lot of car dealerships, there's a lot of insurance people, there's restaurants. I mean, you name it, there's a lot of competition for a lot of different businesses. So can you drill down a little bit more on the niche or niche part of things?
I love the word niche, but riches and niches doesn't quite have the same allure as riches and niches.
Right.
I know it's really hard for me to say that.
I'm sure, yeah. Wasn't he a
grown-
philosopher anyway? Niche? Sorry.
That's okay.
Did that fly over everybody's head? I don't know. Look out, low-flying subject.
Oh, dear. So, what was the question?
Let's bring it back here.
Yes.
The niches.
The niches and getting into a niche market. First of all, the whole premise of getting into a niche market is so that you absolutely get rid of as much competition as possible. Mm-hmm. You go where other people are not.
Right.
So if you decide to specialize in a particular, industry, let's say you go after the car dealerships that you were talking about, but you become the voice for car dealerships, and that's the only way you market yourself. And you go where the car dealerships people are, where they go to buy their different, products and services. Maybe they go to different conventions. Maybe the car dealerships themselves, the manufacturers, Nissan or Audi or Toyota, they have special events where they have exhibitors come in, vendor events. Mm-hmm. And so if you're there, I guarantee as a voiceover artist, you'll be the only game in town. And
Right.
so then you're it. And they don't have to, decide, well, do I like your voice versus your voice, I mean, or go over on price, because then if you're the only game in town, you can name your price.
Right.
Obviously, it's competitive, but you can still, you don't have to cut your price and discount yourself because why should you? Your talent, you shouldn't have to discount your services.
Right. I can hear listeners, I can hear some of them thinking, well, yeah, but car dealers usually go through agencies and stuff like that. Yeah, that's true. But, that's one service if we're talking about radio commercials. But there are a whole host of other things that people can do to create products and services. Before we were recording this conversation, I told you about how I have niched a product that I offer to dentists and orthodontists, and I've talked about this in other episodes. But I went to a dental conference where dentists were getting training on new techniques, but it was also folded in with a marketing conference. So there were vendors and exhibitors there for both the advanced treatment technologies, but then there were a bunch of marketing resources for them to choose from.
And you were the only game in town.
I was the only voiceover guy in
Yep.
there, and I had my product and service, and I charged what I wanted to charge. And for those that bought, they bought it. For those that didn't, that was fine. But
Perfect example of, niche marketing at its finest, because that's exactly because you're going where other people aren't going. So if you see the cover of my book, you'll see that it's got goldfish swimming in one direction and one goldfish swimming in the opposite direction.
Oh.
And that's what you want to always keep in mind. If everybody's zigging, you want to zag. If everybody's doing it, do something different, because you always can do that. And that's where the riches are.
yeah, you and I are both fans of Dan Kennedy, and that's one of the things he talks about is wherever the crowd's going, do the opposite.
It's wise. Wisdom at its best.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are afraid to do it because it's that must be what's working because everybody's doing it. What do you say to that question?
So it's really interesting because that's probably one of the top questions that I get asked is that, if I niche myself in this market, what happens, to other businesses if they come along and want my services? Well, I'm not saying you can't do any other business, but you put your energy into the one industry that you want to work in that's lucrative. I mean, you
Sure.
want to go where there's money, obviously. I
Right.
mean, you look at dentists or doctors or chiropractors. I mean, there's money there, and they will spend it on marketing.
Yes.
So never be frightened to do that, because I know it's scary. It really is scary to say, I can't do what everybody else is doing. But the fact is, you can pick and choose what you want to do, but you put your energy into that one niche market or two. I wouldn't go more than two, because then you start diluting yourself. Because one of the things too, with regard to being an expert in an industry, in a niche market, is educate. If you're willing to educate your target audience, that's part of making yourself the expert of who you are.
An authority.
In authority. Experts educate. That's one of the strategies in the book, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing, that's really, there's no limit to that, because what you choose to find or create your niche in, or niche, I'm going to stop doing that. We're just going to stick with niche.
I do it all the time.
That can be anything that you're interested in pursuing. So if somebody's wondering how they can find a niche to focus on, do you have any suggestions for people on how to do that and how they might pursue that?
I actually have a 10-point list of different questions to look at establishing a niche market, which I'd be more than happy to send any of your listeners.
Oh, okay.
If they email me at susan@richesinniches.com.
Okay.
So then I'll send it to them.
Yeah, and we'll put that email address on the show notes for the episode.
Yeah. So absolutely. One of the top things to look for is, as we mentioned a minute ago, is money. Go where there's money.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to go into an industry where they don't have any money,
Right.
because otherwise you're not going to get paid, and you're a commodity, or you're a luxury item rather, that they don't necessarily need to buy.
Yeah. And one of the pieces of advice that I give new salespeople that come into the station is you want to go find clients with a checkbook, not necessarily a budget.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and this is going to sound maybe mean, but the folks with the smaller amount of money available to pay you for what you want are going to really work you hard.
They'll nickel and dime you.
They really will. And,
Mm-hmm.
and it sounds mean to say, but this is like close to 20 years of experience in producing radio commercials.
Mm-hmm. You know.
You know. It's like, yeah, okay, what did they spend? And it's like, $1,200, and their marketing budget for the year is maybe for all their different marketing is $3,000.
Yeah.
And if they're going to spend $1,200 of it with you, that's almost half of their budget. They are going to really want to make sure they get everything that they think they can get for that. And that's their own self-interest. That makes sense, but at the same time, your time's going to be worth something too.
Well, the other thing to think about is how you become the voice of a certain industry or a certain, company.
Mm-hmm.
So that too is something to consider. If you find the right client, that you become their voice.
Yeah.
And that then your voice becomes synonymous with them, and vice versa. And there's that relationship that's built up. And, that too is invaluable.
Yeah, and it's very true. That can happen. It's actually happened with me. I've had a client that I've been doing things for over maybe 6-7 years now, because they are constantly updating their content, and I've become the voice that they're used to hearing for all those different trainings and tutorials and all those things that I voice for them. So, yeah, it totally can happen.
Yeah, it can. And I did a few of those. I did one for Jaguar cars because my voice is just perfect for that.
Sure it is, yeah.
One for Victoria's Secret. For
really?
It was their in-house training videos that they were doing, and they needed voiceover, and we did a whole story about Victoria Stewart and how they created this whole story around her. It was fun.
The origin story.
Fun. Yeah, the original story, because everybody wants to know who is Victoria. So they gave her a persona.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's great.
It was.
Can you share, do you do case studies in your book?
A few.
Yeah.
We interviewed a few people in each of the different strategies to talk about, how they've done what they've done in a particular market.
Can you share a story of somebody who was doing something, they're just kind of bumping along like most people were in whatever their industry was, and then if they took these techniques and niched down, and what that did for their business? Can you share a story with us?
So the one that comes to mind, and there are quite a few, but one in particular is a young lady who trained as a lawyer.
Okay.
And she became a commodity, She was just doing general legal work and working really hard in a law firm, and she had this passion for entertainment.
Okay.
And she suddenly looked at the environment and she said, how about if I marry my passion for entertainment with my legal training?
Right.
What will I get? And her business took off when she did that.
So she just focused on that aspect of law?
Yeah. And then, of course, she had fewer competitors, and she was doing something she loved. So it wasn't those, how many hours these lawyers work, 80 hours a week
Yeah.
or what.
Yeah. Well, it just benefits everybody because you want somebody who specializes in whatever it is that you're doing.
Exactly.
If you're a successful entertainer, there's money there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's brilliant. So people have to just start thinking about different things that they're interested in.
That's the key. That's what I found works really, really well, is to look at what's your passion. Is there an environment that you feel passionate about? It might be sports. It might be health clubs. It might be insurance. Doesn't seem something that people would get passionate about. But, there may be something. Maybe you're married into a family of lawyers or doctors, and you know that environment so well. Why not marry this talent that you have for voiceover work in with an environment that you really know?
Right. It just makes sense.
It does. And it makes it a lot easier, and you feel comfortable in that environment because you know it, so you can talk the lingo as well, and that makes a difference.
Right.
You don't have to learn that. I mean, I'm sure many of your listeners have experience in other fields as well. They've got backgrounds in all sorts of different environments. Why not marry the two?
Yeah, you're preaching to the converted here. I mean, it's one of those things that I talk about regularly is we all have life experiences. And one of the things I've talked about is what's your story? Write out your story. You talked about the Victoria story. They created a persona. Well, we all have a persona. And my mom has a great expression, says no experience is ever wasted. Mm-hmm. And you have all these life experiences. Some of them you had a lot of fun with. Some of them you're like, I don't ever want to do that again. Mm-hmm. But why can't we just dive in on some of those things that we really like and start to create products and services or offer our services, sell our services within that arena?
Absolutely. And that's really the key. I mean, there's nothing magic about this. There's a lot of just common sense. Sometimes you need, to be guided.
A little nudge.
Yeah,
right. We all do. I can't tell you how many times something's been pointed out to me, and I do the whole, why didn't I see that?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes we're just too close. Yeah, that duh moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're just too close.
Absolutely.
So what's the title of your book, and how can people get it?
Okay, so it's Riches in Niches, How to Make It Big in a Small Market. Mm-hmm. It's available on Amazon. That's probably the best price.
I'll put a link on there.
Yes, and so if you want the hardback version, that's available, and I believe it's available in Kindle version as well.
Okay.
And then if they would like a list of 10 different questions to ask to get into or to find a niche for yourself, then send me an email at susan@richesinniches.com.
Okay, and we'll put a link to both those things in the show notes. And you're starting a podcast as well, correct?
I am.
And what's that all about?
My podcast is called Book Marketing Mentors, and that's where I'm interviewing marketing mentors whose advice, the wisdom you can take and use to market books.
That sounds great.
Because authors don't know how to market their books. They know how to write a book, but they often don't know how to market a book. So I want to interview people who know how to do that and to give them some practical tips and techniques as to how to do that successfully.
It's a whole new world in publishing now.
Absolutely.
Self-publishing, you can do all kinds of things. So you're going to be interviewing authors who've successfully marketed their books.
Or are successful in a certain marketing technique.
Ah, okay.
So maybe like Facebook ads. That could be a way to market your book.
Mm-hmm.
People are only touching the surface of being able to do that. Some people can, some people don't even know anything about it. So let's bring in somebody who's an expert in that field, interview them and say, hey, you can take these, techniques and use them to market your book.
Sounds great. So once that's available, we'll have the address that we can put in the show notes for that as well.
Absolutely.
Well, that sounds good. Susan, I want to thank you for swinging in today and sharing some of your thoughts with us.
It's a pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun.
It's great. I love doing this. So thank you for asking me and looking outside the box, because you've literally taken an industry that doesn't normally think this way in terms of the niche marketing. You've done it.
Yeah.
And why can't others do it?
There's no reason, and the beautiful thing about it is that if you pick a niche, then you become the expert. There's no competition, so there's room for everybody in this. That's the thing. It's like, pick your thing, create your stuff, and then we can all work together to make money.
I've got another treat is for your listeners that I will give them a 15-minute introductory, complimentary, session over the phone, and we can talk about which area might be best for them to even think about going into.
That sounds great. That's really generous.
So Same thing. Email me at susan@richesinniches.com and we can set something up.
That sounds great. Well, thanks again.
My pleasure.
Well, I really enjoyed that conversation with Susan. It was nice to have her in the studio and be able to chat face to face. I learned an awful lot. And if you have an opportunity, go ahead and go to the show notes for episode 36. Send Susan an email, and you can download that 10-point checklist or question list that you need to ask yourself for creating your own niche that you can profit from. Also, you can ask her for a 15-minute consult, a free 15-minute consultation, which is very generous, and I have nothing to do with that. So feel free to go ahead and reach out to her and take advantage of that opportunity. We try and give you all kinds of great opportunities through the podcast. Take advantage of them when you can, please. Another opportunity that I want to have you take advantage of is we have a sponsor for the podcast. If you are not a member of Audible, I've arranged for you to be able to get a free audiobook. All you have to do is go to vomarketingbook.com and sign up to get a free audiobook through audible.com. And you can cancel it at any time. But just if you want to check out a book that you've been thinking about, maybe it'd be neat to listen to an audiobook. I don't have a particular one to recommend to you right now. But if you like audiobooks and you're not a member of Audible, go to vomarketingbook.com and sign up for a free trial with audible.com. That is an affiliate link. Audible is a sponsor of this podcast. I'm very, very excited about this opportunity. It fits very well with this audience. And so I encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. Again, it's vomarketingbook.com, and you can sign up for a free audiobook through audible.com. That's it for this episode of the Voice Over Marketing Podcast. I thank you very much for spending time with me today. And we've got some more cool stuff coming up next week. If you have any thoughts or suggestions and want to send me some information about topics you want me to cover, feel free to do so through voiceovermarketingpodcast.com in the comment section. Until next week, I'll talk to you soon, and take care.
Our program originates in the Boston studios. We hope you'll join us again. Until then, we bid you au revoir, keep your chin up, and the best of luck.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Voice Over Marketing Podcast. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com so you'll get notices of new episodes, and please share it with your friends and colleagues in the voiceover world. Also, it would be a huge help if you'd like this podcast and rate it on iTunes to help keep it near the top of the list. Feel free to share your comments and questions about this episode and future topics you'd like discussed at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. And if you'd like more information on one-on-one coaching where we focus on growing your business, feel free to drop me a line at my cyber assistant's email address at mike@johnmelly.com. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and share your voice with the world.